Yo, what up, everybody? Man, I'm not showing my face in this video because I woke up with a damn cold, bro, like a head cold, and I'm out of it. But the show must still go on, so it's like I wanted to switch it up and do something interesting. So during the '80s, there was like a big, kung fu surge. Everybody knew that, but there was one movie in particular that like took off and it like really blew up. And it was a movie called Bloodsport with Van Damme in it, and it was about a place called the Kumite. It was this tournament, and it's like it was like a tournament to the death. Like it doesn't mean you have to die in it, but you can literally lose your life in the tournament. It was an underground thing, and I think it only happened so many times. It's like some real Mortal Kombat shit. Like this is where they got the idea from, basically. Um, and it blew up. It was a hit, bro. Like it was cool. Then once you watch the whole movie, at the end it tells you how it's based on a true story, and then it gives this dude's like records of like his knockouts and how many wins he got and all this different stuff, and it just makes him seem incredible. Now, most people, that were kids, we never looked into it like that. But people that were into martial arts at that time, the adults, a lot of them didn't buy the story. They were like, "Nah, this guy's full of shit. Like, there's no way in hell somebody did all this." So it's been controversy about his life for a long time. If you look up Frank Dukes, you'll see, military background, but it's like you really can't prove any of this stuff. So I figured let's have some fun. There was a guy named the Pink Man, and he did a whole series on this. And I remember years ago I watched it, and now I'm saying I want to give the opportunity to share the breakdowns that he did. And at the end, it's the Steven Seagal thing. You know what I'm saying? It's just, is Frank Dukes, really just all fake, or is he the truth? And if he is fake, I mean, did his lie, like, was his lie so great that it like changed the '80s? Because it was off this one movie that really like shaped Van Damme's career and changed up like the concepts of like fighting movies. Usually it was just like revenge and stuff like that. And this one kind of has a revenge in it too, but like I said, it's just a trip. Now let's go through this. This big ass lie make a great movie, but at the same time, like, is the guy really badass, or is he just making up shit? Seemed like it was easier back then to lie, like to make up stories about who you were. I guess because they didn't have the internet and all that different stuff. But let's see. Man, I hate being sick. Make sure everything's straight on this side.
I want to ask you some true or false questions. True or false? You once sold a ceremonial sword that you won in the Kumite to attempt to buy the freedom of enslaved children.
I think that's true.
True or false? You once threatened to throw Jean-Claude Van Damme off a building top.
True.
True or false? Your military records were rewritten to eradicate certain events and things in your records.
True.
True or false, you remain an active undercover off-the-books employee of the CIA?
That's a very good question.
True or false, you used to use a double to answer media interviews for you while you were clandestinely abroad? I hope I'm speaking to the real Frank Dukes right now.
The 1988 avant-garde film Bloodsport was, without a doubt, a groundbreaking cinematic milestone that touched the hearts of an entire generation. As tremendous of an artistic achievement as the movie was, however, there is one aspect about it that has been plaguing film scholars for years. That bizarre end caption that lists the world record set by the story's protagonist, Frank Dukes. When we first saw that, I think most of us had the same reaction. Wait, that was supposed to be a true story? Yes, as unbelievable.
Now, maybe, like I said, to an adult at that time, maybe they would question it. But kids, you know, we never looked into it that deep. But yes, as an adult, you would ask yourself, nigga, this shit doesn't seem very realistic. But let's keep going.
As it may seem, Bloodsport is actually supposed to be a biopic. There really is a man named Frank Dukes who claimed to have learned the dim mach from a ninja master as a child, and then fought in an underground no-holds-barred tournament called the Kumite. And although Hollywood has a notorious reputation for fudging the facts in so-called true stories, this particular film is actually pretty faithful to the claims made by Mr. Dukes. In fact, I'd go so far to say that Bloodsport was one of the most honest biographical films ever made. If not for the fact that Frank fabricated every single detail in the entire story. Yes, my devoted listeners, we have arrived. The worst martial arts fraud in human history. Truth be told, I'm not even sure if I should be making this video, because I have a sneaking suspicion that Frank Dukes isn't actually a human being. I genuinely think he might in fact be the genetically combined form of all the other frauds I covered before. Like Bart Vale, he's mostly famous for fake fights. Like Ashita Kim, he claims to be a ninja master of unparalleled ability. Like Raphael Tori, he possesses an extensive false military pedigree and allegedly has a predilection to take hits out on people he doesn't like. And like George Dillman, he claims to be master of the unholy art of the death touch. The man truly is the Megazord of frauds. Unlike other charlatans of his ilk who just make a handful of claims that need to be debunked, Dukes has crafted an entire mythos of bullshit. So prolific of a liar is he that for the first time, I actually have to divide my video up into chapters to properly deal with each set of claims he's made. It's the only way I think I could make this video without succumbing to vertigo. And so, without further ado, here it is. The thorough and systematic destruction of your childhood.
Okay, USA. USA.
The narrative of Frank Dukes' fantasy life began in California when he was 13 years old after meeting a ninja master by the name of Senzo Tiger Tanaka, also known as Takizo Tanaka. According to Dukes' autobiography, The Secret Man, Tanaka was a former Japanese intelligence officer and kumite champion who practiced a form of ninjutsu known as Koga Yamabushi. The two supposedly became acquainted in the locker room of a judo tournament in which Dukes had competed. And after a thorough bout of molestation, I assume, Senzo recruited Dukes to train the art of the Shadow Warrior with his nephews. As I discussed in my Ashita Kim video, Modern schools of ninjutsu have maybe only a flimsy at best connection to the actual ninjas of feudal Japan. Masaki Hatsumi, the most respected instructor of ninjutsu in the world today, alleges to possess a lineage that stretches back to 3 different historical schools of the art. But he's never actually had any of the documents he's basing this claim on verified as authentic by Japan's top Koryu associations. In any case, Koga Yamabushi, despite supposedly having a lineage older than 1,000 years, is not a recognized form of ninjutsu by anybody else in the LARPing community, and was completely unheard of before Frank Dukes hit the scene. Senzo Tiger Tanaka, likewise, was also completely unknown before Dukes, despite supposedly being a world-famous teacher. Nobody in the ninjutsu world had ever heard of him, and to this date, nobody besides Frank has ever claimed to train with him. According to Ancestry.com and other sources, there was indeed a Japanese immigrant by the name of Senzo Tanaka who lived in California around the time Dukes was a child, and who died in 1975, the same year Frank claims his master passed away. Some Dukes supporters have tried to use this as evidence that Dukes' ninja master was real, but several key details don't match up. Frank claims Senzo Tiger Tanaka was an international super spy who worked in Japan, England, and China before finally immigrating to Los Angeles in 1956. The man I found on Ancestry was a farmer who immigrated to the United States in 1910, never appeared to have lived in LA, and was interred during World War II when Dukes' mentor was still supposed to be living abroad.
But what if that was his CIA name? Because I can hear like somebody trying to hold up. Because I'm not gonna front. I like the movie, and Van Damme was cool. But as far as like the real Frank Dukes, I'm not like no big fan. I never, was on a fan bus trying to link up with get an autograph of Frank Dukes. It wasn't that serious. I like the movie Frank Dukes. So I'm saying that to say this. I can hear Frank trying to play that off. Like, nah, see, the farmer was, that was his secret lifestyle. Because remember, he works for an agency.
An interesting enough life, I suppose, but not quite the man Frank described. Perhaps Dukes happened to meet this dude when he was a teenager and then attributed all that espionage and ninja stuff to him later on. Or perhaps he just straight up ripped off the 1967 James Bond film You Only Live Twice, based on the Ian Fleming novel of the same name, which prominently featured a character by the name of Tiger Tanaka, who commanded a cabal of ninjas. When presented with this suspicious coincidence in an interview for a 1988 LA Times article, Dukes responded, Ian Fleming often based his characters on real people. Yeah, as you'll see time and time again, Frank Dukes apparently went to the George Dillman School of saying the dumbest possible thing when confronted by a tough question. Moving on, though, Dukes claimed to have studied with Tanaka for about 6 years before competing in the Kumite at the age of 19. Among the training methods Senzo supposedly put him through included having him spar with his nephews using live-bladed weapons, doing household chores to train blocking techniques like Daniel-san from The Karate Kid, tying stake to his body and having a full-grown Akita attack him, and having him do dynamic tension exercises. This line really stood out to me when I read it in his book. The only other time in my life I've ever come across the phrase dynamic tension was in those old Charles Atlas advertisements that used to appear in comic books. I seriously doubt Dukes would have picked up terminology like that from a Japanese martial arts master in the late 60s. As you'll see later on, this isn't the only odd comic book similarity in Dukes' story. Before we get to that, though, we have to discuss one more imaginary trial Duke says Tanaka had put him through. Having him train with a Green Beret at the age of 16 to groom him for a life as an intelligence operative.
I mean, oh shit.
It is with a heavy heart that I embark on this video. Why? Because, look.
Jumps too damn fast. Hold on. And we get to part 2 of this shit. His military background. Remember, we're just trying to see if the real Frank Dukes is the real Frank Dukes, or was this just the greatest fucking like made up story of all time? Like kid, at the end of this video, we're trying to figure out, do we owe Frank Dukes a thank you though? Because like, even if this wasn't your life, it was such a damn good story that we gotta give you props anyway. So it's like, let's see. I don't know. It could be real.
Yes, before he was even old enough to take the SATs, Frank was already being prepared for life as an international spy. As chronicled at length in his book, Dukes not only claims to be a master ninja and no-holds-barred fighting champion, but he's also apparently some kind of super top-secret CIA operative as well. From executing clandestine missions in Vietnam to fighting pirates in the Philippines, he's evidently lived out just about every action movie plot ever written. And despite the fact that his activities are so secret that absolutely nobody in the United States government has ever even heard of him, he's also won every single military accolade a person can get, including the Navy Cross, the Silver Star, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Medal of Honor, and the Purple Heart, even though his skin is made out of metal and he's totally impervious to injury. According to Dukes, it was pretty much destiny that he would end up in espionage, as both his father and grandfather had been secret agent men. His grandfather, William, whom Frank asserts was an Austrian spy during World War I, had supposedly been the sniper who assassinated Australian General William Bridges in 1915. His father, Alfred, had been a member of the British Army's famous Jewish Brigade in 1939, which is rather odd considering the Jewish Brigade wasn't actually formed until 1944, but I digest. As I stated before, Duke started preparing for life as a spy when he was just 16 years old. Senzo Tanaka, realizing the youngster was fated for a life of action and intrigue after just 3 years of practicing dynamic tension in his backyard, decided to enlist the aid of a Green Beret to supplement his ninjutsu training. He was able to do this through his own extensive connections with the intelligence community, because apparently every single person Dukes knew at this point in his life was either a spy or a special forces soldier.
After learning all the requisite skills of a Metal Gear Solid boss, Dukes enlisted in the military and soon became a decorated combatant in the Vietnam conflict. This is the point where the timeline of Dukes' fantasy life starts to get really hazy and confusing. Direct U.S. military involvement in Vietnam ended in the March of 1973, but Dukes would not have been eligible for overseas deployment until he turned 18 in the April of the following year. I guess he could have forged his birth certificate several years prior when he was 15 or 16 in order to see some action, but that would be the exact time in his story when he's supposed to be getting meat strapped to his body by an elderly Japanese man.
Some of his stories seem to indicate that he joined the Marines in 1975 when he was 18 or 19, and then was deployed to Southeast Asia immediately after boot camp to execute some Rambo-style covert missions. We're not talking about just guarding U.S. embassies or evacuating Vietnamese citizens.
I mean, but even if though they're gonna send an 18 fucking year old, like how much training you fresh out of boot camp? I don't even think like a kid could be like a Green Beret or some shit like that. Like the special forces, those teams, they I think the youngest age would probably be like 21, some shit like that. These guys would at least be 25, you know, with a good amount of military training, you know, to even make that rank. So 18 years old, yeah, that does sound real. That sounds fake as hell. Yeah, that doesn't sound legit.
From Saigon here, but rather hardcore, highly classified combat missions years after regular Marine operations in that region had ceased. The military was evidently satisfied enough with Dukes' backyard ninja Green Beret training to send him off on these special assignments, despite the fact that he had no prior connection. In any case, though, 1975 appears to be a remarkably eventful year in the saga of Frank Dukes. Every interview he's given appears to attribute some different significant life event to that particular period of time. Let's just take a moment to look at everything that supposedly occurred during that year. Number 1, his master Senzo Tanaka died, but not before he could give Dukes a red-white belt in Koga Yamabushi Ninjutsu after his pupil had only been training for 6 years.
Number 2, Dukes founded his own system of ninjutsu called Dukes Ninjutsu.
Number 3, he started and completed boot camp for the Marines. Number 4, he was promoted to Lance Corporal, a rank that requires 9 months of active service to achieve. Number 5, he became a special tactics instructor for the Marines, a position that requires years of active service to achieve. Number 6, he attended the Naval Amphibious School in California, where he studied the Korean art of Hwarang-do. Number 7, he participated in some kind of secret mission in Laos called Operation Sanction, where he was stabbed in the stomach with a bayonet. And number 8, amidst all this shit, he traveled to the Bahamas to fight in the Kumite. Apparently, despite all the obligations he had during this period of time, he still managed to squeeze in enough training to be able to defeat 56 world-class fighters over the span of 3 days. A few years down the line in this fictional chronology during the early 80s, Dukes was recruited in a hotel bathroom by CIA Director William J. Casey to perform even more clandestine intelligence work. Casey needed a, quote, badass who don't take no shit from any motherfucker to do the missions other secret agents couldn't perform, and he thought Dukes was just the man for the job. According to the secret man, Frank was to become an echo, somebody so far inside he's outside. The fact that Dukes had appeared in multiple internationally distributed martial arts magazines openly discussing his supposed intelligence career apparently didn't tarnish his viability as a super-secret agent. Just for the record, William J. Casey was the real-life director of the CIA from 1981 to 1987. Conveniently, he was dead at the time Dukes published The Secret Man, so he was in no condition to contradict any of the claims Frank made about him.
Ironically.
General Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf and Major General John Singlaub, two other real people Dukes featured in his book, however, were alive to give their side of the story, and they weren't too happy about the bullshit Frank said about them. Singlaub, who denied ever having even met Dukes, claims the book was an insult to one's intelligence. Oliver North was another real-life individual Dukes featured in his Tom Clancy fan fiction novel. The Backyard Ninja Master claims the United States Marine Corps Lieutenant Corporal was the mastermind behind a massive campaign to discredit him following the success of Bloodsport. Apparently, anybody who has ever tried to debunk Dukes, from John Johnson in his famous 1988 LA Times expose to the narrator of the video you're watching right now, is just a part of this gigantic conspiracy trying to prevent Frank's accomplishments from being known to the world at large. The United States government, although willing to give Dukes the motherfucking Medal of Honor and allow him to publicly disclose an extensive amount of information regarding highly classified operations he was supposedly involved with, evidently hated him for some reason and wanted people to just think he was a nut. According to Dukes, the conspiracy runs incredibly deep. If you request his official military records via the Freedom of Information Act, for instance, the documents you'll receive give no indication that his Vietnam exploits or intelligence career ever occurred. Although the records do admit Dukes was with the Marine Corps Reserve from 1975 to 1981, they state that he only served 130 days of active duty and was never shipped overseas. His primary duty was just listed as wireman. Damn, Oliver North must have really wanted to kill Dukes' credibility. I don't know why he didn't just go the whole 9 yards and delete Dukes' military records entirely.
Right.
In addition to all this shit, there's also a note in Frank's health record that states he was committed to a psychiatric evaluation in 1978 for expressing flighty and disconnected ideas. Yep. And, on that note, I think it's time we got to discussing Frank Dukes' most famous fictional invention, the Kumite, also known as the Kumite.
All right, now it's getting interesting. Now it's about where we want to be. Talking about this. He weird.
According to Dukes' autobiography, the Kumite, originally called the Parade of Death, was founded in the 13th century by Genghis Khan as a way to rally tribal leaders. Much like the Olympic Games, the competition was extinct for hundreds of years before being revived during the turn of the 20th century. The Black Dragon Society, a real-life ultra-nationalist right-wing group in Japan, supposedly re-established the violent event in 1901 for the purpose of assembling different criminal factions in China. A promotion called the International Fighting Arts Association was created to organize the contest, and since 1950 the group has been holding the tournament in secret every 5 years, as well as numerous smaller fighting events in between. Kumite is a rather generic name for a martial arts event. If you train a Japanese style, you're probably already aware the term essentially just means sparring or fighting. There's always been a fuck ton of competitions with Kumite somewhere in the name. Perhaps giving his fantasy death tournament such a commonplace name was just a way for dukes to confuse uninitiated Americans. A non-martial artist might read about the real-life 100-man Kumite from Kyokushin and assume that's what dukes fought in, when in reality, the underground tournament he claims to have competed in was nothing like that. Before scripting this video, I assumed the reason behind keeping the Kumite a secret was because it was supposed to be illegal. I had planned to devote a fairly extensive segment of this chapter to discussing what the actual legality of no-holds-barred fighting was prior to the modern era of MMA. But it turns out that I don't have to do that because the reason for the Kumite's clandestine nature has nothing to do with the law. According to Dukes, the reason the public is not allowed to view the event is because defeated fighters don't want to lose face and embarrass their arts. Yes, the hardened combatants willing to risk life and limb in the real-life blood sport are apparently so worried about having their feelings hurt that they won't let the tournament be shown to the public. Admission into the tournament is by invitation only, and your instructor has to be a member of the International Fighting Arts Association in order for you to even be considered. So how is your instructor supposed to become an affiliate of the IFAA in the first place? Fuck if I know. After Bloodsport hit the theaters, Duke's got a number of requests from people interested in fighting in the Kumite. Although the entire reason the IFAA supposedly allowed him to talk publicly about the tournament in the first place was to attract more American fighters to the event, any contact information he gave out just led people on a path to nowhere. After a while, presumably to stop the ceaseless barrage of letters he was getting from aspiring no-holds-barred fighters, he eventually started claiming he had a falling out with the International Fighting Arts Association and could no longer get in touch with them.
Oh, that's funny.
But anyway, the rules of the Kumite allow for any style to compete, and the only prohibited techniques appear to be biting and eye gouging. So it's basically the early UFC, but with 3 critical differences. Number 1, Kumite fights start with competitors just a few inches away from one another. This sounds to me like it would give an egregious advantage to grapplers, although Dukes claims judoka never did well in the event. Number 2, it had 3 weight classes: heavyweight, middleweight, and lightweight. Dukes, of course, claims to have been a heavyweight because that's the most impressive. And number 3, in addition to knockout and submission, fighters can lose by being pushed out of the ring. The tournament is held over the span of 3 days, and each day they use a different type of ring to pose a new challenge for fighters. On the first day, Duke says they fought on a 12 by 12 foot platform, basically a small boxing ring without the ropes. On the second day, they fought on a narrow 12 by 4 foot platform called the runway. And on the third day, they fought on a fucking rooftop. Now, although this technically won't debunk anything, I just want to take a moment to discuss how dumb this competition format will be. The Kumite, according to Dukes, is supposed to be the Olympics of martial arts. Its no-holds-barred nature is intended to make the event as close to a real fight as possible, a true test of somebody's hand-to-hand combat prowess. Having fighters be able to win just by pushing their opponents out of the ring greatly undermines this purpose.
True.
A dude could be getting his ass kicked all over the place, only to win in an instant just by giving his opponent a good shove at the right time. The purpose of changing the rings in between each day of the tournament is also perplexing. According to Dukes, the reason the Kumite uses the narrow runway platform on the second day is because you have to be able to fight in a linear fashion. In the ring, you can utilize more body movement and slip, whereas if you are on the runway, all you've got is linear. If you are a linear fighter, this is where you can really shine. That is where the spinning kicks pay off.
Yeah. What the fuck?
What the fuck does that mean?
Right, exactly.
The concept of linear...
Like, oh yeah. All right. Duke explaining it was like, it wasn't even a Zen riddle. It was just let it run it back.
That is where the... If you are a linear fighter, if you are on the runway, you can utilize more body movement and slip. Whereas if you are on the runway, all you've... Kumite uses the narrow runway platform on the second day is because you have to be able to fight in a linear fashion. In the ring, you can utilize more body movement and slip, whereas if you are on the runway, all you've got is linear. If you are a linear fighter, this is where you can really shine. That is where the spinning kicks pay off.
What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah. Cause you what?
The concept of linear and circular fighting styles is something that comes up in Chinese martial arts. Much like the internal versus external dichotomy, it's just sort of a nebulous idea that has no real function when discussing strategy and technique. Just about every single style uses both linear and circular movements and attacks, even sumo wrestling. The only people the narrow runway would benefit are severely mentally handicapped fighters who are only capable of moving forwards and backwards in a straight line. Frank Dukes claims to have won both the 1975 and the 1980 tournaments. To qualify, he supposedly had to win a number of smaller kumites first. This just makes the timeline of his fantasy life even more fucked up than it already was. By my estimations, he would have to have either been busy with high school or the military during this period.
Right.
If his mini kumites took place within a few months of his maxi kumite, that's just one more wafer-thin mint being stuffed into the impossibly engorged year of 1975. Unlike the movie, Duke says that he never went AWOL from the military, so I don't know how he would have gotten special permission to leave Vietnam just to compete in a martial arts tournament. Whenever Dukes gives an interview nowadays, the fighting record he typically claims to have retired with is an undefeated 329-0.
Oh, get the fuck.
This is rather strange considering that back in the November 1980 issue of Black Belt magazine, which was released before the second major kumite he supposedly won, the total number of fights he claims to have had at that point was 329, exactly the same number he claims to have retired with years later. If he really fought in and won the 1980 kumite, wouldn't he have a shitload more fights on his record? It's almost like he coached himself to remember only one number and forgot to appropriately update his bullshit when the chronology of his fantasy life progressed. In addition to this, the interview he gave for Black Belt states that he lost one fight and had 7 draws, so it would seem by his own admission that he's not really undefeated in his fantasy fighting career as he asserts today. One of the claims featured in the end caption of Bloodsport is that he had the fastest recorded kick in a kumite match, which allegedly clocked in at 72 miles per hour. Somebody on one of my other videos inquired how anybody would know exactly how
Right.
fast his kicks were during the fight.
Right.
Well, don't worry, my friend. Frank Dukes has an answer for that. Apparently, every single ring in the Kumite, presumably even the rooftop, was completely surrounded by state-of-the-art high-speed cameras.
Oh, wow.
The IFAA evidently didn't even want to miss a microsecond of action. With that in mind, though, I have to ask, who the hell is supposed to be funding this shit, and why?
Right.
I mean, the Kumite doesn't sell tickets or merchandise, so the event obviously can't sustain itself the way a conventional fighting promotion can. Dukes claims that the IFAA has a number of patrons from the underworld who keep the tournament alive, but he offers no insight into what motivation these gangsters might have for doing this. Whenever organized crime gets involved with prize fighting, which it has done so quite frequently in modern sports history, it virtually always has an intent to make a profit,
Right.
typically through gambling, fight fixing, or just plain leeching off the legitimate profits of a promoter. With the Kumite closed to the public, however, I don't see.
He is a very good point to say that what would be the benefit of having this secret, fight with all these cameras, nigga? What is it, just snuff films? Just like, and there's a gang of people doing this for what profit? They're paying out, if anything, because the winner got to get paid. It's like, it's kind of stupid. It don't make no sense. I'm starting to really think, yeah, this Frank Duke guy was like a liar, but it was just a grand fucking lie. It was just a super great story. Excuse me. And then cinematically, it worked out really good too.
Closed to the public, however, I don't see how they would be able to do any of that. The only gambling they'd be able to do would be on a small scale, presumably just between each other in the back room while smoking cigars and watching the action on closed-circuit TV like a bunch of corporate villains from a 1980s action movie. In addition to Kumite matches, the International Fighting Arts Association also supposedly holds kata competitions like ordinary karate events. Dukes, of course, claims to be the IFAA's undefeated kata champion in both the empty hand and weapons divisions from 1975 through 1980. This might initially seem like only a minor little speckle of bullshit for such an outlandish pathological liar as Dukes, but if you ponder it for a bit, you realize just how much it compounds the effects of all the other crap he spouted about himself. Apparently, during the 3-day span of the Kumite when he had to do battle with 56 world-class fucking fighters, Dukes somehow had the time, energy, and prior preparation to also win 2 additional, entirely separate martial arts tournaments. Shit, if he was really that dedicated to kata, why didn't he just enter any mainstream competitions? If the no-holds-barred Kumite was actually real, I could understand him not wanting to compete in normal martial arts venues like kickboxing. Considering that he's also supposed to be a kata competitor, though, then I can see absolutely positively no reason why he shouldn't have competed in public tournaments with the likes of, say, Cynthia Rothrock. Or mainstream kata competitions somehow not hardcore enough for him? Like what, does the Kumite's kata tournament take place waist deep in lava or something? Another famous claim on the end caption of Bloodsport is that he knocked out 56 people to win the 1975 Kumite. In one of my previous videos, Frank Dukes' Kumite was impossible, which you should watch now if you haven't already, dickhead. I pointed out that a single elimination tournament with 56 rounds would require over 72 quadrillion participants to work. After uploading that, I received a number of responses suggesting that the Kumite could have been held in a round-robin format, but this theory doesn't have any weight to it. Duke says that the losers of the tournament always had to leave by the end of the day, which simply would not happen if everybody was supposed to fight everybody. Besides, round robin is just never used for full contact martial arts tournaments where knockouts and serious injuries can occur. I mean, just imagine waking Paul Herrera up after he got knocked out by Gary Goodrich in UFC 8 and trying to tell him that he has to fight somebody else. Whether there were 72 quadrillion fighters in the Kumite tournament or just 57, that's still a shitload of people the IFAA had to hide during the event, especially when you factor coaches and officials into account. The 1975 tournament supposedly took place in Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas, and apparently nobody in the city took notice of the fact that there was a massive group of foreigners fighting to the death on a fucking rooftop in public. As you might guess, the Ministry of Sports in the Bahamas has no record of a tournament like this ever being held. I suppose the IFAA just pays off whatever country they want to play host to the Kumite, which must really be expensive and awkward for everyone involved. Every single fighter besides Dukes who has ever competed in the Kumite has conveniently had to sign a powerfully binding non-disclosure agreement, meaning under no circumstance can they ever discuss the event lest they want to incur severe legal ramifications and possibly a ninja assassination. After the release of
that would be more like it, because how could they sue you if it's a secret underground thing? Like, doesn't make any sense. That's pretty fucking dumb.
Sport made the Kumite a household name amongst 12-year-olds at least. One would think this agreement would be completely pointless from then on out, but evidently the International Fighting Arts Association keeps making their fighters sign it, because virtually no one besides Dukes and a very small handful of other retards has ever been purported to have fought in the event. Three of the most notable of these supposed Kumite fighters are: Number 1, Irving Soto, an Atemi Jitsu practitioner who claims to be an 8-time Kumite world champion. Because the main Kumite tournament is only held once every 5 years, this must mean he had a 40-year fighting career. Number 2, Richard Robinson, a wrestler and street fighter who is supposedly the real-life inspiration for Ray Jackson and one of Dukes' high school friends. When interviewed by the LA Times about this subject, he quickly broke down and admitted to lying on Frank's behalf so his story would have more credibility.
Oh, look at that.
And number 3, Bruce Lee, whom Dukes claims suffered his infamous near-career-ending 1970 back injury fighting in the Kumite, and later based Enter the Dragon off of his experiences in the tournament.
Okay, I think that's a wrap for this chapter. Now it's time for us.
I mean, this shit could go on forever, but in truth, I think he just, I think he made it up, yo. I think it was all made up, and I think in truth, The Lie just became a great fucking movie. It's like, none of us can front. So if you've never seen it, go check it out. But what I'll tell you like this is, it's all fake. It wasn't real at all. It never really happened. And it seems fucking fake. It seems fake as hell. You know what I'm saying? But for a fake lie, that ended up being one of the greatest 80s movies ever. Like, nobody can front. Yo, that's a dope movie. But yeah, man. Just shows you what the brain can do. All right, man. I'm about to go take some fucking medicine and fucking relax. Y'all enjoy your Friday, man. Ghost.